All right, so I was talking to my guides during my breath work and asking them what I should talk about, and they had said two things: labels and megafauna. So I'm probably gonna break this into two separate parts. Labels. I have this thing about labels. My guides and I do. We talk about it a lot when we do courses, when we do other types of things, about reducing the necessity of labels, reducing the need for them. There's a lot, especially the more I get into this industry and working with spiritual people, there's a lot of emphasis on labels. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, what do you call yourself? Why do I need to call myself something? Why does anybody need to call themselves something? Because when we use those labels, when we use, you know, I can't even think of some of them. I've seen some really creative ones, but whenever we use a label to describe what we do, we're essentially creating like a level, a hierarchy. We're creating preconceptions, expectations. Hierarchy is a big thing my guides are saying. Separation, that I am this and you are not. And that's really why I don't like labels too, is a separation. But a lot of it is because of the preconceptions and the stereotypes that people start to create with them. I've seen people who use labels and start calling themselves things when they are definitely not those things, using labels to help market and help gain clientele and make themselves seem more valuable than the skill sets that they actually have. So labels can be very misleading, not only to the community that is seeking that person out, but they can like build the ego up, build this space up of like, oh, you are that because the community is now saying you are that, when in actuality there's more work to be done. I've seen a lot of people who are young on the spiritual journey start using labels because they see other people doing it, and it's like, hey, you shouldn't be using different labels about, man, I can't even think of, like, part of the thing is I don't want to say certain labels because I don't like calling people out specifically. And some of these would call people out because of how they use them. And not everybody who uses a label is using it for that reason. But what I'm learning through doing these events and talking to more people is that everybody wants a label for what I do. I don't have a label for what I do. I don't want a label for what I do. I really struggle to label it because I do all kinds of stuff. I do things that I don't even talk about too often. I was talking to somebody in an interview yesterday and I was like, hey, I do time travel work. I don't really talk about that a lot. But if I just use the label of extraterrestrial experiencer, which is generally what I end up giving people, is I'm a spirit artist and an extraterrestrial experiencer, just to give them something, just to give them a piece of information, all these interviews and stuff that I've been doing. And I'm like, but that's not me. That's not everything. I experience extraterrestrials. I work with faeries, which people, when you say extraterrestrials, they automatically think galactics. And lately my guides have been like, start dividing it up a little bit more so that people understand you're working with more. So I work with extraterrestrials, who we're now saying are beings of the earth but that we cannot see. I work with faeries, who are of the nature spirits. I work with dragons, who are of other higher vibrations and other realms and planets and galactics. I work with galactics, angels, all this stuff. Inner earth beings. I work with megafauna that exists under the ocean. I work with all kinds of stuff. That label of extraterrestrial experiencer or communicator kind of pigeonholes me into a space of, well, you're an ET guy. I'm like, I'm far more than an ET guy. I do time travel work. I'm a healer. I'm the words people would use would be death doula, but it's far more complicated than that. I retrieve spirits from the dead and help them reincarnate. I help people transmute energy. I can do energetic healing. I'm a spiritual guide. I'm a time traveler. I work with extraterrestrials to help their friends and family overcome fear and embrace them. I work with angelics, which a lot of people completely separate out of all of this because of Christianity. And I work with angelics on all kinds of stuff. I draw light codes that can heal, activate, download. I do all these things. The reason I'm saying all this is because I'm not the label. Why do we need the labels? Why can't we just say, hey, this is Willow Shire. Hey, this is John Doe, Jane Doe, whoever. Why do we need the labels? And the problem with them moving forward in society as people wake is it creates those expectations, those stereotypes, that division, the hierarchy. Having those labels creates all that. So it's why I'm always like, people ask me for a label and I'm like, I don't have one, nor do I feel I should have one, nor do I feel anybody should have one. I don't think anybody should have a label doing this work, because sit down and ask yourself, aren't you so much more than a nurse, than an auto mechanic, than a retail clerk, than a computer programmer, than a hobbyist? Aren't you so much more than that? So this whole idea of labels is like, what are we doing as a society? Why do we have to label everything? This is a big message that I talk about in my books and stuff, because it's created so much chaos to begin with. Labeling races and saying these are the races specifically, and that they look exactly like this, and creating stereotypes around them, like things that I'm trying to shift and break by showing people Pleiadians aren't all blonde-haired people. Arcturians aren't all blue-skinned, tall, astrally light-being people. You know, all these other things. That there are so many more, there's so much more uniqueness throughout all this. And even in those spaces, there are labels that have stereotypes and definitions and all that, when it's like, the Arcturians I've met, they've all had different personalities, different motivations, intentions, different joys, they're all like humans. But if you read online, you'll read like personality descriptions, you'll read all this stuff. This all stereotypes them. This all stereotypes the beings. Gnomes, pixies, fairies. God, you can walk a quarter mile down the road and find a completely different village of little beings that have completely different ways of life, that refuse to interact with the other ones because they're so different. And like, the fairy world is extensive and just super, super unique. But if I say, but when they come to me and they go like Doug is a juniper gnome, but he's not a gnome. That's what they call themselves. That's the label they use, but they're not gnomes. They're not gnomes in the traditional red cap, Germanic sense of the word. They're more like pixies in personality and the way of life. These beings are vastly diverse. And so the whole point of this video is, with labels, we're doing ourselves a disservice by requiring labels for everything, when in fact we should be embracing the uniqueness of everything. And it's kind of like with names. Names are labels, and most of the beings you'll meet will be like, well, I don't have a name. You don't need a name, because we recognize energy. I don't even use names when I talk to most of them. The only reason I ever really ask for a name is so I can write about them and people can understand who I'm talking about. It's all energetic. I see them and I'm like, oh, hey, friend. That's it. That's all it is. I even have trouble now with human names. I have to sometimes ask people, because I recognize energy. I know exactly who they are, but their name might not resonate, stick, type of thing, because it's a label. So think about that on your journey. Do you need the labels? Love you all. Grateful for each and every one of you.